Is part of your, what you did here on page 30, no, it's page 28. It says notes to the financial statement.
Yes.
Is that part of your report?
The basic financial statements include the statement of net assets, the statement of activities, the balance sheet, the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, and the footnotes. So the footnotes are all part of the basic financial statements.
Okay, at the top of the page on note 6, that's something there that you put in there that's been bothering me for quite a while. Would you explain why you put that in there?
That's required by accounting standards. If there's concentrations, then normally if you receive, and it's 10 to 20% or more of your total revenues, or you have your total expenditures to one particular vendor, that will be disclosed in the footnotes.
You talked about the economic dependency.
Right.
Is that saying that at some point one day when we've got these buildings like the tech center and the paddleboard place, and that it costs so much money a year to operate these buildings, and when the Mosaic money runs out, we're not going to have the money to continue to operate these buildings if we don't have a plan? That's not what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying there.
Okay.
I guess you can get there from what we're saying, but if the numbers would support that. But what this is saying is that you got 65% of your total revenue from Mosaic, and you got 24% of your total revenue from
Okay.
EDA.
All right, well, that just kind of, I thought that's maybe what you were getting at there, and if it was, I was pleased with that, but apparently, because one of these days, we're going to be doing car washes to keep these buildings up and going. Okay, how about on page 35?
Okay.
Or it's section 10.5541I6. What is that?
You're talking about the,
It says rules of the Auditor General requires a statement to be included. What is that paragraph about?
that particular statute relates to financial emergencies. And there are certain criteria in the Florida statute that if the government meets that criteria, you're considered to be in a state of financial emergency, and that kicks off a whole process where you have to go through the governor's office and report it. But you're not in a state of financial emergency. One of those is you don't pay your payroll taxes, and others you miss a pension payment, and others you have 2 years of negative deficit equity in a row. One of those conditions will kick you off as being in a state of financial emergency. And the Auditor General, that's one of the specific areas that we're required to address in the management letter. And you're not in you don't meet the criteria for that.
Okay, we don't. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Questions from the public?
We're not at that point, Mr. Coleman.
Any other questions on the financial statements? I know we've thrown a lot at you, and I appreciate you staying awake for all of it. But yeah, I'd be glad to answer any questions, any other questions you might have, or if you think of something later on, our contact information is there. Please feel free to give us a call.
I just had one question for you. What, if anything, in your opinion, based on what you've reviewed, when we do have the Auditor General come back, what, in your opinion, might be something that they would have a finding on or an issue with, based on what you've reviewed?
Some of the things have changed. I know the first 3 comments they had to do with the continuum agreement, and some of that relates to things that happened in the past that can't be changed. And I think you've made some changes in that respect, as far as doing a better job of writing the contracts and doing monitoring. That was, I mean, the first one I think has been And I think you've gotten an answer from the Attorney General to respond to the first finding. I guess it remains to be seen if the Auditor General agrees with you. The second one had to do with the way contracts are written, and the third had to do with monitoring, and that specifically addressed the continuum or the life sync or whichever one they were looking at, contracts, which were things in the past that can't be changed for that contract, but it can be changed going forward for future contracts. It made a recommendation to the board that you're a component unit, you've met that. Made a recommendation to address our audit findings, which, as the slide shows, you've done that. So I think you've addressed a lot of the Auditor General's concerns that can be addressed. I mean, there's, like I said, there's some things that happened in the past that can't be fixed because they happened back then, and it's a legal document now. But I think you've addressed most of the things going forward.
I have a question. Has anything new come up, or have you looked at 100% audit of projects?
100%? We don't look at 100% as part of the audit. That's,
No, but there was a question or request for 100% audit, which was modified by Mr. C to go down to 25% and then see what happens.
We're not on that item just yet, but it'll be
Okay.
next on the agenda.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Sarah and Christy and Charlie for the hard work you've put into this the past year. We've come a long way, and you're to be commended. Charlie's kind of like an NFL football star. He's expensive, but he's effective, so we'll continue to work on it. I have admonished him that in the future, any audit comments are going to result in $5,000 deducts. So this would have been a $10,000 hit this year, Charlie.
Thank you.
I would like to echo that. We really appreciate all the assistance that we got from staff. There was nothing that we asked for that we didn't receive. And as you saw with all the corrected findings from the past, I think that bringing Wicks Brown in has substantially improved the financial reporting for IDA.
And also to add to that, if you recall, we were meeting in the May and June timeframe in the previous couple of years for the reports, and this was presented at last month's board meeting with the final today. So that's pretty impressive. That's about 6 months sooner than it had been in the past. So that's definitely commendable.
There is because of the component unit status, we will not be filing annual financial reports this year independently. Our audit will be sent to the BOCC, discreetly presented on their audit, and sent to Tallahassee with the BOCC's audit. So that is a procedural change that everyone needs to be aware of.
Any other, I'm sorry.
The motion, I'm not sure.
Any other questions or comments from board members? So I believe we're looking for a motion to accept and allow the chair to sign. Is that correct, Ken?
Mike, what is the formal?
Yes, if the board could accept the audit and then and we get a signed representation letter, then we can issue the finals.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to accept and authorize the chair to sign. And we'll open for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments from board members? And at this time, we'll take public comment. Mr. Coleman, you're recognized.
Henry Coleman. I think every one of these audits each year has this one section called related parties, transactions, or relationships. And I think it would be helpful for the public if that was disclosed exactly what those were, number one. And secondly, what you're going to do about it. There's been 4 audits that I've seen so far, year after year, with the same findings. I mean, I think those are discrepancies. I don't think that's a good thing. And so I think that the auditors are pointing that out to you, that they discovered this related parties transactions, and they are expecting you to do something about it. Could I have a response from the board?
Do you have any other concerns that you'd like to bring during your time?
I'd like to do it one at a time if I could.
I'm sorry?
If you could address that, then I'll have one other one.
No, if you'll go ahead and bring all your concerns during your time, and then we'll discuss whether or not we want to address your concerns.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Then thank you. Then the second thing is the capital assets program. I know I've been writing some stuff on this. I asked Mike about that. I don't think that they audited your capital assets program per the policy that's required, which I think it requires you to keep track of all the stuff that you own, physical assets. They have to be inventoried, they have to be accounted for, they have to be just like the county does. So that's the first thing. The second part of that is Continuum Labs and LifeSync. Every month for $7.25 million worth, I believe they were buying things, laptops, servers, equipment. I also believe that all of those assets were supposed to be in the tech center sooner or later. I don't think they are. I think that those assets belong to the public. They were purchased with public money with the intent of creating a technology center here in Wauchula. I don't think that your board knows what you bought, where it is, if it's still there, somebody walked off with it, or who owns it. This never been decided, to my knowledge. I don't think you've even decided who owns those assets. All of the stuff that was purchased for the technology center by these 2 companies. I think that should be addressed, and I think that the auditors should account for the capital assets program when they do their audit. That's the second thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Could I address a couple of those points?
Yes.
I guess the first point had to do with related parties. And that's not a finding, but that is a required disclosure. It's just for full transparency. That's not necessarily saying that it's a finding. That's in the footnotes, and it's not in the findings section.
Is it illegal to have related party transactions?
That would be a question for your attorney, but in certain instances it could be, but not in every instance.
If they're disclosed, and the relationship is disclosed, and there was no impropriety, isn't that the objective of related party transactions?
Well, like I said, that's a question for your legal counsel. I'm not an attorney, but I'm not.
Do they exist in other audits?
Yes.
So you as auditors have learned that you need to take a look at related party transactions. It's part of an audit process.
We're required by the accounting and auditing standards to look at that and to put that in the report, yes, in the footnotes.
We welcome the related party transactions, we welcome the disclosure, and we will continue to do so. I don't know how else to operate, so.
Yeah. I guess the second one, there may have been a little bit of a misunderstanding, but you do have a depreciation schedule, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, did you do an inventory of the fixed assets?
Yes, if you'll go to note, none of the continuum assets belong to the IDA.
Yeah, I mean,
No, sir.
Charlie, if we could
Well,
have you come to the podium to,
of what was purchased by IDA, there is a depreciation schedule, and there is, and I believe Charlie did do a physical inventory of it in accordance with the statutes and county policy. As far as the continuing assets, Mr. Coolman's correct that they're not on the IDA's books, and the contract is silent to that. It doesn't say one way or the other who owns those. And that, again, goes back to one of the comments that the Auditor General had as far as in the future when you write contracts to be specific about certain things. But that As it stands right now, that was treated as a grant expenditure on the IDA side and not treated as an asset of IDA.
Well, that is a concern of mine. Ken, can you address that? Don't we have a county policy that says that it belongs to aren't we part of the county entity? Does that fall under?
No, the IDA has its own capital assets policy. It was my understanding from the get-go that whatever Continuum purchased with grant funds was not going to be IDA property. For instance, office supplies. They go in there and buy 6 reams of paper, a fax machine. Is the IDA going to own everything? My understanding from the get-go was not.
That's not.
Well, that's not a very good example, Ken. Come on, I mean, you can put toilet paper in there and water bottles, but when you're talking about millions of dollars worth of computer equipment, and they take it to Wesley Chapel,
With millions of dollars of.
well, I'm just assuming it was millions of dollars. I mean, that stuff's not cheap.
Well, but where does this end? I mean, we also have Kuleana. Are we going to start inventorying the items that they purchased with their grant funds? I mean, exactly why are you Kuleana Adventures, the kayak company? I mean,
okay.
where exactly does it end, and why do you single out Continuum when we have other projects that are in the same position?
Well, that's quite a bit of money, and I'm just curious of why it wasn't in the contract.
Don, I don't believe in the very beginning that anyone honestly contemplated there were going to be purchase of physical assets with the grant funds, at least for my angle. I don't believe that was the case. I don't believe it was ever discussed. And quite simply, whatever these guys purchased with the grant funds from the IDA's perspective have been treated through the audit as not IDA property.
Yeah, I hear that, but I mean, that's a lot of cotton picking money. And, I mean, you thought that in the beginning they would not buy any computer equipment when they were doing this?
Servers?
It seems like we should be looking at the process though, Donald, not the dollar amount. Because a computer is more expensive than toilet paper. If they're using it for the purpose of the grant, then to me it's the same. It should be theirs. We granted that money to them to use as they saw fit to do what we asked them to do. What we should be looking at is, are they doing what we asked them to do?
Well, are they? They're not here today.
But that's not what you're raising up. That's a different question.
It is. It is, okay.
I just wanted to give a couple of examples, kind of going to what Vanessa was saying. Continuum, or the original grant, LiveSync, was awarded during the first and only cycle that was held for Mosaic money. Well, in that same cycle, there were several projects that were awarded money. Hardy Lakes received $200,000 out of Mosaic money. Again, we do have to figure out where this process is going to stop. Does that mean that we should be owning and putting in our capital assets everything that was purchased out of the Hardy Lakes grant that they have used to buy for Hardy Lake?
That's totally different. That's a county thing for the county, people in the county.
It's not different. It's
not
the same
a-
exact
it's not
grant
a private-
cycle.
It's not a private.
It's not different. It was the same grant cycle, the same money doled out. Easy Products,
Lord.
they're a private company. Easy Products received a grant. Should we own everything that they purchased out of that grant?
The grant for training.
Well, if they fail, then we should get that stuff back. I mean, if they're still going and doing work and stuff, fine. But Mr. Bond's not here today to tell us, and, you know, his contract is up in June or July, and he's supposed to be here every month according to his contract to tell us what he's doing. And he's
That's
not
the
here.
question that I think is being asked. I think the question being asked is, why are we not showing that we're owning all of the physical equipment purchased out of the grant? And what I think several of us are saying is that that's not how the grant cycle was set up. That's not how the contracts
I
were written up.
agree, it wasn't set up that
So-
way. I'm saying it should have been.
I think if we were to have this discussion right now on a new grant and somebody was coming in, we were gonna give them $7.25 million and we wanted to know if we wanted to own every notebook, piece of paper, computer that they were gonna buy, I would say, no, I don't wanna own all that. They need that for their business. IDA doesn't wanna track all that stuff. We don't want to have it, we don't want it when they're done with it. That's a part of them doing their business, that's what we give them the money for. It's up to them to use it wisely. It's up to us to oversee the entire process, but not to own those individual assets. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, let me tell you a story.
Donald, may I make just one comment?
If it's time for public comment, I guess it is. Okay.
I don't have it with me, but I believe that the continuing lab contract said that this was to partner with the IDA to create a tech center. Well, how can we create a tech center in Hardin County if all the equipment belongs to them?
The other thing to take into account, Donald, is the type of equipment that I recall being purchased. You know, we're not talking about buildings, we're talking about laptops and servers. Those things are typically depreciated on an accelerated schedule. They have a limited lifespan. At the end of a 3-year grant cycle, those things have little to no extrinsic value. Zero. You can't give them away. And that's the reality, the circumstance that we're arguing about here right now, is at the end of this grant cycle, the real dollar value of however many laptops were purchased, I don't remember how many there were, but it wasn't an exorbitant number. It was 4 or 6 or something like that. 6 laptops, and I have no idea about the servers, is at the end of the day, the dollar figures you're arguing about are not significant. They're immaterial to the overall numbers of the IDA.
Well, let me tell you a story. Years ago, the Workforce Board, South Florida Community College was the administrative entity and the fiscal agent for the Workforce Board. And when we parted ways and become our own fiscal agent and administrative entity as a board, we got all of our equipment back that they had purchased with our money. And the used equipment was worth over $500,000. And we sold it for that. And that included a lot of things other than computer equipment, big screen TVs and other things. So, you know, apparently we really don't know what they use that money for because we just don't know. And that's just my concern. I mean, as the Workforce Board, we got that equipment back and it was used. And we got $500,000 for it.
Let me make a couple of comments here. Ms. Bellflower, to your question, all of the items that have been purchased at Tech River are on our inventory. The items that are at issue here are those that have been purchased with grant monies by Continuum. I want to remind everyone that when we initiated this grant, we believed that we had the right to enter into contracts to foster and promote economic development. The Auditor General treated our project as defined in Chapter 159. The conditions for a project in Chapter 159 are generally prescribed by rule so that we can satisfy lenders and bondholders. In this instance, we did not do that in the contract because the intention of the board was probably best stated by what Mr. Jensen has offered. We simply are trying to compel or help a company develop something that will lead to the creation of jobs in Hardin County. We did not give any consideration to inventory in any of this equipment. However, as we go through the audit, I have no problems in compelling them to tell us how many actual widgets and gadgets, tangible items that they purchased, and we'll try to get a list of it for you. And in the event that they should come to some calamitous end, we will make every effort to recover it. I don't know what else to do at this point.
Well, you know, to me, as long as they're still in business and working, then fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with them using the equipment. If they're still in business and they're still trying to recruit and get back together and move forward and get some investors and make this thing work out, well, I don't have a problem with them keeping the stuff. But they're not here to tell us if they're still in business or not. Aren't they supposed to be here every month according to the contract?
I think that we've kind of gotten off of the subject of our audit and into a whole other debate about Continuum Labs and also getting into, you know, contracts. That is not the subject we're on. So we're going to redirect back to this audit. We have a motion and a second on the floor. If there is any other public comment related to this audit, we will hear it at this time. Otherwise, we're going to move forward with the vote.
Actually, I'd like to hear the answer to his question.
His question
Are they
is,
supposed to be
but
here?
his question is not relative to the subject that we're on, and we're not going to entertain it any
That
further.
is your decision.
That is my decision as the chair of this board, correct. Any other discussion about the audit from board members? Any other public comment about the audit? Mr. Coleman, you've already had your time, thank you. At this time, we'll open for,
Madam Chair, could I just say one thing?
Sure.
My understanding is, Mr. Horst has asked that this is your decision, but it's your decision in coordination with Robert's Rules of Orders. I mean, this is the way the meeting is expected to be
Correct.
conducted. It's not an arbitrary decision. It's the way the meeting is expected to be conducted, is to stay on point, stay on that task. And your job as chair is to bring it back on point when we stray.
correct,
And I
thank you
think
for the
you're doing a great
clarification.
job, and I just want to make sure everybody understands. It's her decision in consideration of the rules that she's given to work under. She's doing exactly the decision she's making exactly the decision she should be making. But we can bring that up later when we have time, we can add it to the agenda, but it's not on this agenda item.
So to clarify, we do have a motion to accept the audit report and authorize the chair to sign. We've heard public comment and comments from board members, and if there's no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Before we move into the Continuum Labs, let's take a brief break, and we will come back together in 5 minutes.